I just did the countdown again so that we can have stream ended 50 seconds ago. Thanks for tuning in. Is it starting up again? What is happening? Now we have an ad. When did we have an ad? Give me an ad. There we go. Oh, wait. What's happening? Okay, good. Wow, we have like a 30-second delay this time. All right.
Interesting.
Bring this down here and over here. I think it's Kayla. Every time Kayla's in the chat, that's what it is. I'm going to blame her.
Yes.
And oh my gosh. Just jump, just do what I want you to do. All right. Are we here? We're here? We're streaming? We're good? Oh, I'm so sick of this.
We are. Wow.
Professionals. That's what we are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is this even working on the thing? Do we see it on the thing?
On YouTube?
On YouTube, yeah. We good?
YouTube's the
Just
view.
about to go. It's on 0 now, so it should be starting up. Maybe not.
There. Yeah. All right. Here we are again. Sorry, everyone. We're trying to figure this thing out because we had it figured out, and then of course there's the announcement that Hangouts is going away or whatever, and so we've been experimenting with different things that are just like a giant trash fire rolling down a hill. That's what it is so far. And Kayla, yeah, I agree. As Kayla says, see, as soon as I start participating like you told me to, it started to break. So I blame. No, I'm just kidding. It's not your fault. It's that every time you've been on the chat so far, I've been trying new technology that has not gone well. So, but we are here. Okay, we're good to go. All right, Scott, let's do this one more time.
Okay. So what I've been working on is I've been doing a lot of videos. I'm sorry, my dog is going crazy back there. But I've been I've been batch recording a lot of videos. So I did like total of 8 videos, filmed them, and I've edited a few of them too. I batch recorded videos for my newsletter. I did 6 of those, and then 3 other videos. And I've also been working on my comic maker toolkit. And one of the videos I'm doing, you can see that artwork that's part of it. That is for a marker review that I'm going to be doing too. So just trying to get ahead of that, because I found that I'm basically every weekend I'm like, oh, I got to get a video out, and I'm just trying to get ahead of the game with that so I can focus on other things and not have that, if I need, just get a little buffer there. So that's what I've been working on.
That's awesome. I like that idea a lot. I need to get better at getting more videos out. Josh, how about you?
So finished the inking the page of quarterly stories, kind of figured out what I was going to do about the shadow tones and stuff, which I think really help it stand out. So that I recorded a song for fun over the weekend, just like a weird acoustic-y one. And then
it sounds like Simon and Garfunkel, but it's talking about
badly
pollution.
Imagine Simon and Garfunkel if they can't play guitar. That's what. But yeah. So then yeah. I mean, just basically. Yeah, that's pretty much it. What about you? What'd you get going, Cory?
Oh man, not nearly what I wanted to. So you can see on the screen, I started to build some of the characters in my animation, and I spent way too long doing this, and I did it wrong. Like as I started thinking it through, it didn't turn out. It's not going to move like the way that I want it to, the way that I built it. So then I had to go in and start like rebuilding it. And then upon like rebuilding it, I realized that I might as well just make it from scratch. And then I think I also did a video talking about like rigging things in with joysticks and sliders. And yeah, that's not terribly productive. There's some more work on trying to like plan out different things and whatever, but it's been crazy. So I didn't get a ton done. Yeah. How about challenges, Scott?
No major challenges, just things that I'm trying to, like I said, I'm trying to get ahead of those videos. That's always been a challenge in the past, where I'm trying to make that not so much of a challenge. Just trying to kind of get some of that stuff out of the way so I can focus on creating all this other stuff I'm trying to get to. But no major challenges other than, I think the biggest challenge is going to be figuring out this, what we're going to do about Hangouts, because Josh and I have to do Artcasters, and so far Discord doesn't seem like it wants to work. So yeah, I don't know what to do. And the other challenge is my dog won't be quiet. So
if anybody knows of a good alternative to Hangouts, I'm open for some stuff. We've tried Discord now 3 times, and it has been horribly problematic every time. So. Anyway, yeah.
I read that Google is supposedly using, like, they're gonna integrate it into chats, something like that. But the thing that I'm curious about is, like, when they do that, are they going to kind of have a way to stream key it or have it integrated with YouTube? You know,
you guys might finally have to come over to the dark side of OBS.
Well, I have OBS, but I don't. Yeah, I mean, how difficult is that going to be to set up? As I use OBS when I do my live streams, but I don't know as far as getting multiple people on and getting guests on and all that kind of stuff. How easy that is.
It'll be the same to them. It'll be the same. So I'm using OBS right now, but to you two, you have no idea because you're just on a Google Hangout, and then I just capture the window. So.
Got it. If that were hypothetically like cats, would it work?
Yeah, it would work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe you'll have to show me how to do that. I mean, I don't know if I'm ready to delve into my. I don't think I have time to learn the Stream Deck yet. Do you need the Stream Deck or?
Nope, you don't need it.
Nope.
It makes things easier, but you don't need it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh well, then that might be the way to go, because so far my streams have been going pretty seamlessly. So.
Yeah. I like your streams. I think those are good. Yeah, Josh, how about you for challenges?
All right. Well, the main one is like just trying to stay on the ball and like get progress done. Because the temptation, because my wife and kid are visiting family, and so the temptation when they're gone is just to be like, I'm going to play video games, and so. So kind of fighting that. And then similarly, like that, the personal challenges I've had with like trying to, work out and stuff every day has been a little difficult, because lately it's like I think I like pulled a muscle or something in my leg. So it's like that just kind of makes the whole thing a little harder to do, which is funny because in that case, much like Scott, I'm trying to build a buffer. It's the worst joke.
Pretty punny, man. That's pretty punny.
All right.
Hey, we've got Lowell from the Philippines.
Right.
Chats with us. What's up, man? Yeah. So for me, for challenges, this isn't so much a challenge as it's negative, but just a challenge from like a time-consuming standpoint. We threw my son his KMM, which is Marshall's first birthday. And so there he is there, and there we are wearing handmade Marshall's jewelry from his extended family that they sent us. And it's a huge party, and it was a really big ordeal. It took weeks to plan, and anyway, had a giant big giant bouncy castle pirate ship thing that all the kids loved. Sent several kids to the ER on that. So it was successful. I don't know. the mom of the kids that went to the ER, she was like, no, this is just what it's like at our house. There's a lot of blood that we had to mop up, but it was, so, I mean, that's always a good, it's always a good bouncy castle experience. The food was good. Had our friend cater it. So we had shawarma, and, yeah, it was good. It was really good. So, but you know, just that, and then guests in town and other time-consuming things. End of the semester looms. So if I can make it through this week, then I will have significantly more time soon. So.
Yeah, well, that can be crazy time-consuming. It can also be inspiration for like a future horror comic, The Bouncy Castle.
Right. I haven't seen that much blood in a long time though. The kid just caught the forehead right to the nose, and it was like, you know, it was you know, I don't know, but his mom was not concerned. Neither was his dad. They were just like, yeah, this just happens a lot. They're just kind of rough and tumble kids. So it's like, okay, but I mean, like, you know, anyway, I could go into more detail. And then our friend that catered was carrying the food down the steps and like fell down the steps and wanted to save the food and sacrificed her body and saved the food. And so like her like left arm was all scraped up and bloody. And it was lots of...
I've got this picture of the old Sesame Street, 12 coconut cream pies.
Oh man, it was an eventful party. Maddox had his first taste of sugar, and he liked it. Kind of doing his little pincers, one bite at a time. My wife wouldn't let me shove his face in the cake, so he just ate like way more frosting than I thought he should have. But anyway, so yeah, so it's good, but it was good first birthday, and it's weird to think that Josh, a year ago, I was streaming out of Phoenix, and I think a few days after that, I drove to Scott's house and you know, did a broadcast out of the CircWorks labs. It's funny, that seems like it was like 10 years ago, and it seems like it was last week. So it's a weird thing, but yeah. So anyway, so yeah, that was, as far as challenges go, that was time consuming. So, Scott, how about plans?
Plans, I am going to continue I got freelance stuff to work on, but besides that, I'm going to continue to work on this comic maker toolkit, try to get, I wonder if it's possible to get that done this week. I don't know. Basically the actual product is done, but now it's just all the kind of advertising and stuff that goes along with that. So, there's that, and then after that, the main thing is the website. I know I've been saying that for forever, but I'm getting closer and closer. So
cool. Josh.
Yeah. So I'm definitely going to scan this page and clean it up today. And so if you're up like super late tonight and you go to quarterlystories.com, you will probably be able to read the page I just finished.
Awesome.
And then I'm planning on trying to do thumbnails for the next page. And each time I'm doing that, I'm just one step closer to that magical finish line, which is really weird. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. For me, more of the same. So I have kind of a backlog of videos that I want to make before I forget how to do this stuff. But every time I go to make one of those, I realize that I understand instinctually how to use the stuff that I just used, but I don't understand it well enough to articulate it out loud. So that's been stopping me. So I kind of want to get to the point where I can make some tutorial videos on joysticks and sliders and a few other things that I used. And then I also want to have a few more character turnarounds done. And maybe a more fleshed out kind of storyboard, possibly in Automatic, not by Wednesday, but in the next little bit, that's kind of where I'm heading down. So
that's awesome. I did want to throw in for challenges because I think Scott is probably in a similar boat, and Cory, I think this is definitely a time where you can gloat about where you live, because the the last like few days have been insanely hot in my area. So I'm imagining that probably is reflected in Arizona. I don't know.
Oh, it is hot. You just don't go outside.
Yeah, that's kind of
Like,
where we're at
I go
now.
outside to let my dog out, and it's like, oh man, just do your business so I can go back inside.
Yeah, and when I let my dog out, I'm like, is my dog gonna come back like baked? Like,
I figured enough to come inside if it's too hot. Sometimes she'll go out there and she'll just lay in the grass though, and just like hang out there. But
I just always imagine it like one of those Looney Tunes cartoons. You know, you put your dog outside and then you open the door to let him back in, and it's just a cooked turkey just with steam.
Yeah, it's been really rough up here. I took my leather jacket off today when I rode my motorcycle, and it was like kind of a balmy 85, 87, I think. Went and got some frozen yogurt because it was so warm. Of course, I get frozen yogurt when it's 10 degrees below zero, so that's not an indication of the weather. That's funny. All right, so today's topic I'm super excited about. Before we jump in and do the announcements, I would like book recommendations from anybody in the chat. So there's a few people watching now. No genre or anything. It could be fiction, nonfiction, or whatever, graphic or otherwise. Things that you're reading recently, things that you're rereading, things that you want to read. We're just going to talk about books today. So today's topic is books we're reading and want to read and have read. It's just a book episode. And I wonder if we should put some sort of timer on each book, because I think the three of us could have a tendency to discuss each book at length. Yeah. So are we going for like a list with an elevator pitch? Or are we going for like...
I've got an idea of how to frame it. So like maybe we can just, kind of mention the book, briefly describe what the gist of it is, and then maybe what we got out of it, and if it applies to our art at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I just before you start with the intro, I just want everyone to know that I did not know that this was going to be the topic today, so I'm very unprepared. But I'll do my best.
We cheated, Scott. I just pulled up my Audible account on a device, and so I'm just going to look at because half the time I can't remember the title of the book. I loved it, but I can't remember the title of it. Yeah. All right. I'll start off with one that I just started, and I am in. How far into it am I? Oh, this is out of order. That's annoying.
I don't know if I distracted you away from doing an intro.
So. No, I did it.
You did?
Yeah. So I'm about 20% of the way through. It is called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future and the New Frontier of, and then I ran out of room on my iPad, so I don't know what the rest of the title is. But it's Surveillance Capitalism. And it's by Shoshana Zuboff. The elevator pitch is basically that capitalism is mutated from a free market economy to an industrial economy, and from an industrial economy to an information economy, and from an information economy to a data mining and surveillance economy, where companies have grown so large that they have begun using human behavior as a product. And the thing that I find really fascinating, and I was tweeting about this earlier, is that it's really helped me understand the things that I didn't understand about social media, because I teach social media at a collegiate level, like the theory of it and like the strategy and things like that. There's always been some things that I didn't get because I was looking at it through the lens of I was either a user or I was a product. I'm either being sold to the advertisers or I'm the reason that channel exists. And I've actually come to realize that neither of those things is true. What we are the raw materials that are being mined and sold. And so it's kind of, if you think of it like sheep, if you can mutate or alter the sheep to produce more wool, you don't really care how the sheep feels about that. You just care about your wool production. And in this case, wool would be behavioral data that's being sold to advertisers. And so anything that these surveillance capitalist companies can do to create more user data, they will do that, whether it's collection or production. And so that goes into both sides of the manipulation and the surveillance of it. That has helped me understand why everybody keeps going to an algorithmic timeline when everyone hates algorithmic timelines and just wants a normal timeline. And it's because they don't care what the sheep think. They just want more wool. And so it's really fascinating. And I'm going to do, I'm sure, hours of content on this later. But that's one of the ones that I'm reading right now.
Love it.
So how about you, Josh?
So I'm reading. I've been kind of bouncing back between two really lighthearted books, the Mueller Report by the Washington Post, and then The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Shirer. So those are like my current ones, but I'll just kind of start with the Mueller Report. So that book is, if anyone's not familiar with it, it's basically a report that was made based on the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. And Robert Mueller, the special counsel on the case, compiled this massive report. And despite the one thing that's kind of a bummer about it is, like most kind of official reports, there's a lot of sections that are completely redacted. That, you're like, kind of, sometimes it's like somebody's name and that makes perfect sense. And then there's some moments where you're like, why did they redact that? Like, I want to know what that is. So, but what's interesting is what wasn't redacted in it is pretty impressive. It's a pretty good window, I think, into the current administration. And I find that it's also just fascinating to sort of find out just a little bit of behind the curtain of some of the things that have happened during the last election and during the presidency. So like that to me has been fascinating, and I'm trying to think of ways that it applies to my art. The only thing I can think of is hoping that more people kind of read it, because I think regardless of what spectrum of wherever you land politically, I think a lot of people would want to know some of the things within the report, because it definitely doesn't clear the guy who's currently in office. It actually paints a pretty bad portrait of what's going on. And I think I would want to be aware of that as like a U.S. citizen. So that's why I've kind of dipped into it, because I read articles about it and I realized that I was making, like, I didn't want to be one of those people who hasn't actually read the report and is just kind of taking politicians' word for it, you know? And I think more people should do that, like, for, whether you're on the right or the left, so you don't end up having somebody say, well, in the Mueller report, and you respond with, well, that's not in the report, and you haven't read it. That would be a bad thing. Or well, that is in the report, and you haven't read it, and it isn't. So, yeah. So that's, but I think that just kind of fuels my, I think there's a slight bit of art making that can be kind of anti-authoritarian, and it kind of feeds that fire a little bit. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Scott, I know you didn't prepare, so just interrupt at any point in time when a book strikes you.
Well, I can kind of tell you, I did start a book. I'm not very far along with it, an audio book. I'm only like 2 hours into it.
Love it.
But so this is a book that I got when I was a kid, and I tried to read it and I couldn't, because it was just too, I don't know if you would consider it hard sci-fi, but it was like, I don't get what's going on. Plus I have a little bit of a learning disability, in that when I read, my mind just wanders all over the place, and I'll start reading and I'll get 3 pages in and not remember what I read and have to keep going back and things like that. So, but audiobooks are better for that. But I started reading Dune, or listening to Dune.
Oh, sweet.
So yeah, and it's from my understanding, I assume it's still in production, but I know Denis Villeneuve, who did what was the? I know he did the newest Blade Runner, and what was it that he Arrival? I think it was Arrival. Anyway, I like his films a lot, and I can't really wait to see what he does with it. Because my only other exposure to Dune is the David Lynch one, which I like for certain reasons. But so I kind of figured I'd give it a shot this time, and so far I'm enjoying it. But like I said, I'm only like a couple hours into it. So
yeah, cool,
awesome. That's a good recommendation too.
Okay, I'm gonna do 3 really fast ones.
Go for it.
Okay, African Samurai, the historical rendition of now I forget his name. Yasuke. Yasuke is the first non-Japanese samurai. He's an African slave that kind of won his freedom and then rose to the ranks to be like the second most powerful person in Japan during his life. And super fascinating. Really like that one. And then I also read, I will highly recommend this, though know that when you're getting into this, that it is a silly book. It is a weird pitch, but it's called the Bobiverse. We are Legion, we are Bob.
And that's been recommended to me so many times. So now I'm really curious. This may not be something you can just gloss over. So talk about it.
Okay. So I'll spoil the first chapter of the book just as a teaser. It's not much of a spoiler. Basically, there's this guy who, some software upstart that now is multi-billionaire, right? And he and several people are at a conference, and he had just come from this place where they mapped his brain, and he basically bought like a Futurama jarhead of himself, right? So he buys the possibility of being turned into an artificial intelligence once he dies, and then the next day is hit by a bus or something, and so they scan his brain according to his will. They scan his brain, and then some significant amount of time progresses, and he becomes aware that he's awake again, and the last thing that he remembers was getting hit by a bus, but like thousands of years have gone by, and now he is discovering his new life, and it turns out that they have put him to be the AI of a remote space exploration ship, like an AI ship that has a 3D printer on it, and so he can go and take raw materials and build copies of himself. And that's the premise of the book. So there is a fleet of Bobs flying around the universe, trying to find a place for humans to settle because the Earth is like running out of resources.
Huh.
And so many things that are so like fun. It's not a heavy book. It is a funny, lighthearted, yet not like, I think silly is probably the wrong word, but there's 3 books, and they're super easy reads. Like you can burn through them, in a week. But they're fun. I like Bobiverse. So there's my longer pitch for the Bobiverse.
Awesome.
I am Legion, I am Bob. And then the last one, Story by Robert McKee, The Substance, Structure, Style, and Principles of Screenwriting. That is, I disagree with a lot of it, but it is one of the deepest dives into the structure of movies, and the storytelling of cinema specifically. The parts that I disagree with are, I don't really believe in genre. I believe genre is kind of like a marketing sorting filter, rather than a storytelling device. And he goes through and he says, if you're in this genre, then here's the options that you have, and that type of thing. And I think it's a little keyhole, but it's a dense book, and it is really good. Like as a companion to like Invisible Ink, I highly recommend it. Way better than Saves the Cat, which I hate. Saves the Cat so much. Anyway, so storytelling craft, that relates pretty applicably. Just because,
That's awesome.
Yeah. So there's
Nice.
3.
Let me see if I can do 3. Okay, I'll do 3 too. So I just finished The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and that, just on a historical note, this is like the very downside. This is going to be really weirdly juxtaposed with the next one. But if anyone's unfamiliar, it's pretty much about the rise and fall of Adolf Hitler in politics and how he pretty much started World War II. And it gets into just all of the documentation of what exactly was going on with that government, all the head figures, all the kind of key decisions and stuff. And it was written relatively shortly after the war. And so it's full of a lot of really disturbing but like super important information. And it's definitely something I think anybody who's like a bit of a history buff should read. And honestly, I think people who aren't history buffs should read it too, because it's good to be aware of history so it doesn't repeat. I'm trying to think how that would apply to art. I think that just kind of fuels, again, that just kind of punk rock side of things, because it's hard to come out of reading that book and be like a fan of domineering, overbearing governments.
Yeah. It does make you appreciate. On a lighter note, it does make you appreciate a 2-party system, though.
Sorry, what?
It does make you appreciate a 2-party system, though.
100%, and it definitely draws a very clear distinction between what some people might be like, hey, this guy's Hitler, and it's like, no, he's not. Like this was really like,
yeah,
the guy was an insane person, but not quite equivalent to a lot of what people compare him to, just on a whole other world of evil.
Yeah.
Then I've also been reading these books by Scott Meyer, and these are books that are more in that Bobiverse sphere. So this is like a kind of throwaway read series that I'm like super addicted to, called the Magic 2.0 series. And I just finished the Vex Generation, which is like book 5 or 6 in the series. There's like a new one every year. And it's a super fun series. I'll just kind of describe the first, because it gets so complicated. There's no way I can describe the one that I'm currently reading. But the premise is pretty much this guy, Martin Banks, is kind of a normal programmer type guy who's at his office day job and discovers a file that, when it's altered, alters reality. And so basically, after discovering this file, he makes the mistake that apparently you discover much later many people have made when discovering this file, of like loading up his bank account and doing all these super things, and then being basically pursued by the FBI for fraud. And so he decides to, like, after a quick online search, he's like, where could I have like magic abilities that wouldn't be suspicious, that wouldn't like draw like the local authorities against me? And he was like, I'll go back to like medieval era, and to an era where like I could pretend to be a wizard, and like people would just, buy it because there's like Merlin and all that. So he looks up very quickly on Google like the Age of Merlin, and goes back into that time frame, only to discover that there's a whole bunch of people who've done the same exact thing and now live in that era of time, pretending to be wizards, but really altering files, and it gets really silly and goofy. So it's very like, it feels like a contemporary version of like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like that kind of humor.
Right.
So very like Douglas Adams-y, but really well written, excellent audiobooks. And there's a character named Philip the Wizard that both myself and Kevin Cross are like obsessed with, because he's hilarious. But yeah, so it's definitely a fun read, very lighthearted, very quick reads. You'll like, very similar to Bobiverse. It's like about a week. And that's why I keep getting Bobiverse recommended to me, because I think they're kind of in a similar niche because it just keeps getting recommended to me.
Yeah, and
So
I'm getting the reverse. I keep getting that book recommended, so I need to read that
yep.
one.
Oh yeah. Well, call me if you do, because there are parts with Philip that you'll just be like, dude. Anyhow.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, I've got a couple quick ones. If along the lines of World War II, this I've reread it now twice this year. So good. Beneath a Scarlet Sky. Have either of you guys read Beneath a Scarlet Sky?
No.
Oh, it is phenomenal. It is about this guy, true guy who had just an unreal, like uncanny, like Forrest Gump like series of events where he just came in contact with some of the biggest players in Italy during World War II. And so he's just this kid. He's like a high school kid, like he's in love with love, you know, and he's flirting with girls, and then like there's bombings and stuff. Anyway, he ends up going to this this kind of I don't know what you'd call it, church in the mountains, kind of a school for boys, a refuge, and he's way older than everybody else is, but they're kind of hiding him from the Nazis, and so the priest there starts teaching him how to smuggle Jews over the mountains into the neighboring country, like through, I think it's through the Alps. And so he does that for a while, and then he has, through a series of events, has to enlist as a Nazi and becomes a spy, and then becomes the chauffeur of one of the major generals of the Nazi army, because as a kid he used to race cars in the streets, and so he knows how to like fix cars. And so like anyway, it's like this crazy series of events, and it's completely true, and the guy's like a real historical figure, but because the Nazis were so good at erasing all of their documents and everything, very little is known about the people that he interacted with. And so anyway, but this guy spent like 10 years writing this book, just doing research. He went to Italy 3 or 4 times to interview people who were still alive at the time, and like the girls that this kid dated. And anyway, fascinating and extremely well written, like great audiobook too. So that one. And then Notorious RBG was interesting once they got through like the giant lists of dates. That was super boring, but after that was good. I read earlier this year Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. Nice. And that is not a light read. That is a extremely eye-opening and depressing thing. And along those lines, Handmaid's Tale. I just finished Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, dude, I just read that last year, and that's a super heavy but really well crafted book. You know?
Yeah. So so after those, then you gotta jump to something else. So like
okay. So I'm gonna cap the depressing stuff and then get to uplifting stuff. So I also read another, like the reason I was reading Rise and Fall was I read this book called Bonhoeffer that's about this pastor who was part of the Valkyrie operation to assassinate Hitler.
Right.
And it's like super cool. It goes through his life and kind of what led him to sort of come to a point where he was just like, no, this is absolutely not acceptable. And even though he was like a pastor, he was just like, I don't care, I'm going to kill this guy. And it's fascinating, and it's really inspiring actually, because it's like, you know, somebody kind of standing up during that time to like pressures that, you know, are hard to even fathom. And then on a lighter note, I'm kind of midway through Edge Dancer because somebody got me really obsessed with Brandon Sanderson's Lightbringer trilogy, or what's the
Stormlight Archives.
Yeah, the Stormlight archives. And so I kind of slammed through the majority of them.
I feel like I
With
need
it.
like a nerd alert sign
Yeah,
flashing right now.
yeah, and
Sorry.
that's like great, heavy, awesome sci-fi, and very like we've talked about him, and I think enough on here. But I will say he's a unique writer in the sense that most fantasy novels feel pretty derivative,
Yeah.
and his stuff like has a really I don't know. It's like a very unique voice within that realm of science fiction, or sorry, of fantasy,
Hmm.
where it's like it's a completely different take on that genre, and I think that's why he's a pretty good writer. Um, but yeah, so that was cool. And then
But we haven't gotten into the nerdy stuff. We need to like, I mean,
yeah,
it's like he writes in such a way that we almost need to do a side
yeah,
podcast just dedicated to the stuff that he's written. So Edge, you're on Edge Dancer right now, right?
yeah,
Have you
which is a
read?
very light book compared to his series. It's just the length of a regular novel.
Yeah, he calls his novellas like they're like novel length, and then his novels are like the size of like a trilogy, a pretty hefty trilogy.
Yeah,
And he's right. Man, he's the most prolific guy alive right now. But have you read Warbreaker?
not yet.
Okay, Warbreaker needs to be next on your list because it's technically one of his novellas, but it's a really interesting one, and it relates to art because okay, here's what I'll say about Sanderson. Each world where he writes has its own set of rules of the powers, the magic, the whatever. There's like superpowers or magic. There's a system of like science and magic, and it's different on each world. And so the one in Warbreaker is based on color, and so
Ooh,
there are entire villages that are intentionally gray so that no one can attack anyone else because you have to use color to fight. And it's just a really interesting way at looking at color. Like, and the way that he does it is fascinating. I don't want to give too much away, but it's and the sword. Now we're getting into the weeds, but the sword that talks in the Stormlight archives,
yeah,
this is the origin of that sword.
nice. He's kind of a talking sword that's a little bit of a he has a little bit of an ego
Yeah,
issue,
he's a bit crazy.
and he occasionally like flips out and doesn't function, and so it's kind of awesome. Yeah, but it's weird to say, but there is a book with a talking sword that does it in a way where you're not like, oh, come on, a talking sword. Um,
Yeah,
uh, yeah, and then on a more art related note, like Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, like had a pretty big impact on me for just management and also honestly just some thoughts about interacting with teams, interacting with clients that are for anybody who's not familiar with Brene Brown, like check out her TED Talk on YouTube. It's kind of the thing that sort of exploded her in the world of kind of coaching and stuff like that. But most of her focus is studying vulnerability and the effects, like the psychological effects on people
yeah,
of being vulnerable, and the negative impacts of people who are closed off and not vulnerable. And it's super interesting. She wrote this whole book targeting specifically vulnerability when it comes to leadership and how that kind of affects like a leader's um, ability to kind of get compliance and get like a team kind of working and stuff. So I found that really fascinating, and I think Cory's pointed this out too. We both talked off air. Neither of us are really big fans of like the structure of her writing. Like she's not like
yeah.
a poet. She's not writing like this really affluent, beautifully written stuff. But the gist of what she talks about and the stats and the information is really compelling and definitely makes it worth a listen. But I would definitely recommend just listen to the audiobook. Like I think it would personally, I would have trouble enjoying it reading it, because I think you kind of miss a little bit. Like when she speaks, it kind of makes sense, some of the vocabulary that's used, more than it does on paper.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, her accent definitely helps, like the vernacular, because it's a very it's not well written from a reading standpoint, but listening to, and she reads them, and so listening to that is good. Have you read The Gifts of Imperfection?
Ooh, I should.
Yeah.
I will.
So that's one of hers that I also highly recommend. I've read last year. I had a Brene Brown kick. I read Daring Greatly, Braving the Wilderness, Rising Strong, and The Gifts of Imperfection
Nice.
by her. And they all build on each other. It's really good, but I liked The Gifts of Imperfection a lot because it really builds a solid case for being human and being imperfect and being flawed, and how owning that is way more valuable than hiding it. And so that's like a really good thing.
Oh,
Go ahead.
The last one that I really wanted to mention is just fascinating for anybody who's a music geek. It's a book called Our Band Could Be Your Life by Michael Azerrad, and it documents the beginnings of basically independent record labels, starting with like early 80s hardcore. So it kind of starts with Black Flag and their record label, and then goes all the way into like the late 90s with like Sub Pop and K Records. And it's just like a fascinating kind of window into a lot of the kind of more iconic indie, like hardcore punk bands and stuff. So for anybody who's like a fan of like independent music, particularly on the harder end, it's super. It's a super interesting, kind of cool deep dive. And for anybody who maybe doubts like the toughness of the members of Black Flag, like that book will make you. Like when I read the book, I was like, I'm so glad I wasn't on their tour, in their tour van, because I would have gotten killed. So yeah,
That's funny.
Yeah.
So we've got a worldwide broadcast here. We've got people from the Philippines, people from Idaho, and now Jan is here from Spain. So,
Jan, who brilliant art. You guys should check out his YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I've got two, and I've got a question. We talk about The War of Art all the time by Stephen Pressfield. Have you read The Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield?
No.
Okay, so one of my favorite points in history is the Battle of Thermopylae, the Hot Gates. It's what 300 the comic and the movie are based on, where King Leonidas faces Xerxes, the prince of it's not Persia. Is it Persia?
I think so.
Yeah. It just sounds weird to call him the prince, I guess, at the time. I think, was he? No, he was a king of Persia at the time. He was the prince when his dad attacked. Anyway, during the Battle of Thermopylae, he was the king. But it is a historical fiction about a kid whose village is subjugated by the Spartans, and he becomes part of the war train of King Leonidas's 300, and so he's like kind of part of the supply line, and so he like witnesses and participates in the battle, and you see everything like leading up to it. And people say about this book, people that teach like ancient history at university, they say if you'd like to know what it's like to live during that time, read Stephen Pressfield. And so I did, and after having listened to probably close to 200 hours worth of college lectures on that time period in Greece, and I still like learned stuff, and it was really fascinating. I think you'd enjoy it without that type of foundation, but with that type of foundation, it just came to life. It was fascinating. And then on a lighter note, Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman.
That's a good one.
I like that one a lot. So it's if you've read American Gods. There is a character in there, Anansi, the African spider god, who is the owner of all the stories on the earth, because he stole them from, I think, the tiger or something, and it's about his kids, and so it's a really interesting book, fascinating book, and very funny because it's Neil Gaiman. It's really funny, so I like that one as well.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
I just tacking onto that, like anybody who's kind of dipping into Neil Gaiman, and if you like that kind of realm of it, like the more just straight mythology realm, I definitely recommend his book on Norse mythology. It's so good. It's retelling all the classic Norse myths, but in a really here's the thing, like when I was in high school, and I think a lot of people have a similar experience that are kind of nerdy history buff type people, you want to read about mythology, so you buy these books on mythology, and the myths themselves are interesting, but the books are written really tediously. Like, so
Yeah.
it's like you're getting these really interesting dynamic plot points, but it's written by kind of like a professor who's not really engaged. And the great thing about Neil Gaiman kind of taking on some of these classic myths is he, like, same with the Anansi, like the Anansi stories are classic mythology, not on the Norse end, but it's a classic kind of storytelling device, and just his spin on it is so cool. But I definitely would recommend pretty much anything by Neil Gaiman. That guy's just too good. He's annoying.
Yeah. So
you should have comics, not books too. That's terrible.
And along that line, The View from the Cheap Seats is a collected works of Neil Gaiman, of all of the speeches he's given and forewords that he's written and articles that he's written about reading. And if you want to get excited about reading and libraries and books and everything, just start anywhere in that book and just read a couple of those. That guy is just incredibly motivating when it comes to reading and stuff. And so that was really interesting too. But yeah, Norse mythology I really liked. Good Omens, that he wrote with Terry Pratchett, which is another one of my favorite authors, was phenomenal. Anansi Boys, American Gods, Neverwhere, The Graveyard Book. Those are all good Neil Gaiman books. I like those.
Yeah, and I love that he has like hands in both worlds, because his comic work is incredible too. So
yeah,
like, a really good writer. Still, like, I fear the Sandman adaptation, because I'm like, I hope they don't kill it. I hope they don't destroy it, because it's such a good world that he's built in comics.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that you could adapt. You could adapt Good Omens well, just because it's like written like old school British humor, like early Python, and kind of with a mix of like radio dramas and stuff.
Yeah.
And they did. I mean, I've only watched like 2.5 episodes because I've been super busy, but it's so good, and it feels very similar. And they even do, if you watch, there are some offensive things in that show, so be aware of that. But if you watch the intro, they did like that style of like weird photographic hand cut out kind of stop motion that you see in like Holy Grail and stuff like that. But they mixed it with like
style.
Yeah, it's just, oh man, I don't know. That immediately I was really skeptical, and immediately upon seeing that I was like, okay, I'm in. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
dude, that makes me think of another one I just finished, which was Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, which is Eric Idle's autobiography, and it's so good. It's super entertaining. It's seedy though, because like out of the members of Monty Python, he was sort of the one who was hanging out with Mick Jagger and like the Stones and doing a ton of drugs, and so but any of the books by the Pythons are really good windows if you're writing humor,
yeah,
or you're interested in like the art of comedy. because like it's interesting. Like Idle and John Cleese are like on one end of the spectrum, and then you have kind of the Michael Palin kind of side of the spectrum, where it's like the Oxford Cambridge schools of humor, and it's really cool because they all have their own kind of reliance on certain gimmicks and certain like things that they think make comedy funny. And of course that ends up filtering through these books that are usually really light reads, but they give you a lot of good little like bullet points on how to build a joke and how to build like a good sketch and stuff. And I think for storytelling, I think paying attention to like comedians and comedy and humor and how they structure a good bit really can inform even like a great like story that has nothing to do with humor. It just, I think the structure of storytelling you need to go through to get a laugh, it you know, is a pretty compelling exercise in storytelling and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about we close off with?
Yeah, we could keep going, but we should.
Let's do quick recommendations.
Yes.
I hate the term self-help, so I'm not going to use that term, but quick recommendations on like very applicable books to like either craft or motivation or art or life. I'll start with Mindset: The New Psychology of Success by Carol Dweck. It's the one that talks about growth mindset, fixed mindset. Pretty interesting. It could be about a tenth the length and be a really good pamphlet. So it's kind of a redundant read, but really fascinating. And then Die Empty by Todd Henry is like one of those like you should leave it all on the field. Don't hold anything back. Like if you're not working on like your life's work right now, you're wasting your life. It's a big kind of kick in the pants. Really good kind of light a fire under you to get your side project going type book. So those are two recommendations.
Nice. Self-help wise, kind of self-helpy. Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert B. Cialdini. It's a pretty good window into kind of like the thinking of people who are trying to use persuasion, and how that like kind of affects artists. Is if we can't persuade people to follow or support our work, we're kind of screwed. Like, and so it kind of gives a nice little window into kind of some of the darker and lighter sides of influence and persuasion techniques. And actually, I think that it's also a really good shining light to where like it can also inform you of like if somebody's using the art of persuasion in a negative way, which I think would be beneficial for people. And then really quickly, this was really good for me. It's more on like a spiritual end, but my friend Alan Noble wrote a book that's incredible called Disruptive Witness, and it kind of deals with faith in the era of social media and constant distraction. And it's gotten really excellent reviews and stuff. And he's a friend of mine, so it's super sincere, but it's just a really compelling and good book, and it makes me really proud to be friends with the guy, because you always want your friends to be making cool stuff. So it's always a pleasure when you're like, oh, this is actually like super good, yeah. So that would be it.
So Scott, any final recommendations of any sort?
A book that I like a lot and that I think has really helped me, something I use quite a bit, is mind mapping. And the book is by Tony, I think it's Buzan, I think. But it's all about it. It's just kind of like brainstorming and how to come up with ideas using mind maps. And if you're not familiar with mind maps, it's basically a non-linear form of note-taking. So you kind of start with a central theme and it just kind of branches off. I use that all the time. And another book that I got a lot out of was Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull.
I've heard really good things about that.
Yeah, it was just really interesting to get an insight into Pixar and how they create story and everything like that. I mean, there's a ton of others that I can't even think of right now, but yeah, I mean, usually when I do listen to books, that's kind of what I'm listening to. Is sort of self-help and not, well, like you said, I don't know how to categorize that exactly, but you know.
I think they all kind of fall into the category of self-help. I just think self-help has a bad rap because there's so much garbage in there, but there are some really good ones. So
and we talk about the War of Art all the time, and I mean, I definitely also recommend reading The Art of War. That's a good book too.
Yeah. Along the lines of the War of Art, the Icarus Deception. Seth Godin's The Icarus Deception.
Anything by Seth Godin too, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Seth Godin's great. On this one, he kind of deviates from like his normal thing, and it is like a deep existential dive into creation for the sake of like being human, and it's really good. And he talks about how the safety zone and the comfort zone used to be the same thing. You know, back in the day when you felt uncomfortable, you were probably like your life was being threatened, but they've moved nowadays. So where you feel uncomfortable is where you should be. And when you feel comfortable is where you're actually in a threatening position. Anyway, really, really good book there. Jan is asking if we'll be posting links to these books later. And I will give someone $1 if you guys do that for us. Because I will not. There's too many, and I don't know. Somebody should do that, and I will. You can even use an affiliate link or something if you like, and I'll just put it right in the show notes because I don't want to do that work. So sorry. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I think we could do this. I think one of my biggest takeaways. I know that I'm biased and that I'm getting a biased view and an unfair kind of snapshot of people because people in college think that they're busy. Some of them are, most of them are under the impression that they are busy. My impression is that a lot of college students do not read books. And I don't differentiate between reading a book and listening to a book. And the only reason that I'm able to get through so many books is because I listen to them while I work. This sounds like I'm about to pitch some sort of Audible subscription or something, but we don't have an affiliate account with them. So anyway, but you really need to be reading books. Read as many as you can, good, bad, ugly, it doesn't matter. Just get into the habit of reading books, because if you can start getting multiple authors' voices in your head and start seeing how story is shaped and start filling your mind with ideas that are not yours and that are not necessarily like popular culture or the prevailing media influence at the time, you're going to reap so many different benefits, from just creativity to like independent thought to being able to see patterns that you might not have seen before, the lexicon that you're able to draw from, and the foundational elements of storytelling that you're able to draw from significantly increases. If you are not reading at least, a few books a year, which doesn't seem like that much, but for some people, I heard a story the other day where there was a college student that was really excited to read a book. And somebody was talking to them and said, "Which book?" And he said, "No, just a book. Like, I've made it through school thus far and I've gotten to this point and I've just been really busy. And now that I'm not at home, I'm excited to read a book for the first time in his life." And I was like, oh, that is so it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter whether you're used to it or not. Reading is significantly important to your life. And if it isn't yet, just try some of these books that we've mentioned. Maybe not some of the heavy depressing ones, but maybe some of the fun ones. If there's one that really piqued your interest and you thought, oh, that seems super fascinating, Jump into that one, and don't let anybody shame you for like what you're reading, because it's all okay. It's all fine. Whatever gets you into books, I think is great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in like that, like just to kind of show the power of reading. Like pretty much, once I became an art director, you end up in this world of like managing people and management and stuff like that. And one of the things that every time I'd approach another manager asking early manager questions, they'd be like, "You have to read this book." Because what I found is like most people who are effectively like leading people are constantly reading books.
Yeah.
And there's multiple reasons for that. One is, and this goes for any practice, but like if you have this whole world of people who've made a ton of mistakes and have learned from them, there's two ways to learn those mistakes. One is just by doing it yourself, and the other is by like listening to people who've done it before, made the mistakes, and try to avoid the mistakes they made. And so like that's a huge asset. You have this whole volume of wealth of knowledge to kind of pull from. The other main reason it's like super good to be constantly reading is it improves your critical thinking and your critical thinking on the fly. So the more experiences of other people you have, the more empathetic you're able to be, and the better you get at problem solving. Because weirdly enough, like most stories are problems.
Yeah.
Like most stories are problems and solutions. And so I think something about the engaging of your mind in that process like really enriches that. It also just, it gives you a bunch of content for conversation, which is great too. So, but it's also just super fun. So, you know, and I've met multiple people who are like some of my closest friends who are like avid, crazy readers now are people who like when I knew in high school were like, books are for nerds. I don't read, you know, and in the right book. And second, like they got that right book. It like opened this door, and now they're kind of in this beautiful world of entertainment that's completely different, but it's super important to comics and the storytelling that we do, like animation and stuff like that. Because there is something really unique about like allowing your imagination to be carried by words. You know?
Yep.
I just remembered a book that I'm actually currently reading, Perspective for Comic Artists by David Chelsea, who we've had on the Artcast.
Yeah.
Fantastic book.
Yes, and it's told as a comic. And
Yeah.
It's just and I've read a lot of books on perspective, and this one's just the easiest to kind of understand. It makes the most sense. So if anyone's struggling with perspective, definitely pick up that book.
Yeah, that guy is a genius. Oh man,
Dude.
I love that book and the extreme perspective for comic book artists.
The extreme one is crazy because it's like I kind of know David, and like he's such a nice, like humble guy. But when I remember he was working on that book when I first like started hanging out with him, and he was showing me these things. Like he's like, this is how you map perspective to have a globe that you can look at and it's accurate to perspective. And I was like, my brain just kind of exploded because it's this. I mean, there's a math to it. It's insane. But
let's do perfect 5-point linear or curvilinear perspective. It's like,
yeah,
wait, what?
And I think there's like 4 people in the world who can do it. You know, even though he's like, here's how you do it. It's like that hard. But what I love about his writing is like Scott nailed it. He like has this real gift of taking these really what people overcomplicate and kind of explaining it in a very like matter of fact, like accessible manner, and doing it in a comic format. So it really like resonates, I think, with our crowd of cartoonists, you know?
Oh yeah. Great suggestion, Scott. Oh man, I could talk about that book forever. It's so good. So good on so many levels. I'm going to call it. So I'm sure we could keep talking. But you guys should stop listening to this and go start a book right now. And the main thing is I want to know what you guys are reading, what you recommend. What didn't I mention that I should read? I want to know that. And if you want to see my stuff, you can go to corykerr.com. If you want to see Josh's stuff, you can go to joshuakemble.com. And if you would like to see Scott Cirkland's stuff, you can go to circworks.com. And we'll see you guys all in a couple days.
Later.